A hope away from home. Mr. Tete Paddy is joining us as chairman as Executive Secretary Ghana Refugee Board. Also, Miss Esther Kiragu is a country representative UNHCR. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Great. Good to have you in studio. Is there a thing like Happy World Refugee Day?
Yes, there is. Yes.
Okay. Kiragu, is there?
Yes, there is, because that's the day we draw attention to the real issue. Yes.
What is World Refugee Day?
World Refugee Day is the day the world has set aside, the international community, of which Ghana is a member, to commemorate the fact that there are people amongst us, humanity, who have been forced by war and persecution to flee their homes. And it's very easy for the world to forget that there are such people, so we need to draw attention to them so that we can give support for them to live a life that's meaningful like the rest of us until solutions are found. Yes.
Hope away from home. What does that mean?
For persons who have fled disturbances, insecurity, it's important that we keep their spirits up. There are people like you and me who have had to leave their homes. They come with skills, they come with all sorts of contributions that they make to our society, and it's important that we recognize this. And there's a reason why we say, yes, we celebrate World Refugee Day, because we celebrate these people and celebrate their resilience.
How does one become a refugee? Let me ask that question, Mr. Kirigo.
It's easy because
tell me about it. Blow me away.
Yes, I mean it dates back to the Second World War, when people were displaced in Europe and they had nowhere to go. So being a refugee, you have to have fled international borders for reasons of war, persecution, on grounds of race, religion, nationality, membership of a social group, or political opinion, and you are not able to afford yourself the protection of your own country, or the country is not able to protect you, that you have to flee across international borders to seek international protection from another country. So you go through a process, and that's the legal definition. But in layman terms, it's people who have fled war and persecution and are looking for peace and safety.
Mr. Paddy, year on year we get education from you and Ms. Kiragu and the rest of the team at UNHCR on why you should stay at home and not become a refugee if there are no external factors pushing you out of your place. Is the message sinking down to the extent that people now know that if I become a refugee, some of the privileges that may have been at home, I get to miss that?
We hope so, because we keep sending the message. But it's important that we realize that there are people like us amongst us who are refugees. Sometimes if they don't tell you I'm a refugee, you don't know they're a refugee. But it is a message that we must all hear and value the freedoms and the peace that we enjoy. Because it doesn't take much, and then things go.
Ms. Kiragu, so what are we doing this year in terms of marking the World Refugee Day?
This year we are celebrating on two fronts in Ghana in particular. We have a function at 10 o'clock today at the Blue Oasis Refugee Community Center here in Accra.
Right.
But we are celebrating here in Ghana the fact that we found solutions for the Ivorians before. And they've gone home. Many of them have found solutions. They are no longer refugees. But we are also drawing attention to the fact that there is a new situation unfolding for the Burkina Faso refugees who are only now fleeing from their country into the north of Ghana. And they need support because, as you know, the north of Ghana is quite stretched in terms of social services, and the host population needs support to be able to host this new influx of refugees from Burkina Faso.
Mr. Paddy, ensure that people come and seek refuge, say, in Ghana? Ghana has its own culture, its own traditions. People have a way they live. How do we ensure that if we bring people from outside to join us, we do not try to unnecessarily influence them to toe or kowtow to our culture and tradition, but to stay original, because they are just here temporarily, and at some point when all is peace and calm where they came from, they will go back. How do we ensure that we strike that fine balance?
Good question. First of all, we try to make sure, we do our bit to make sure that the two groups of people live peacefully and coherently together. And we, in doing so, we include them in our national programs. Now, your question is not to how we don't influence their culture.
That's right.
What you find also is that a lot of the time, people who flee, using the Burkina Faso one for as an example, they are very similar people across the borders.
Right.
And so their cultures are not that different. There are issues of language, language differences. But what we find out is that they end up learning the language that with our language, and in this case, our official language, English, for instance, and then they end up with becoming bilingual, which is actually an advantage for them. So we, as much as possible, the two communities learn from each other and pick the good things from each other, and so far it's been good.
In terms of support for these persons, I mean, if you're a refugee, you come in, the country itself has its own burden. How do we ensure that you're not a burden onto the country? Support for you, jobs, schooling for children who come along, etc., etc. If you want to take that, Ms. Kiriakou.
It is something that we always have to bear in mind, that the hosting population, especially the border communities, don't bear the brunt of this new influx of people who come and are having to use their resources, including water, including schools and health. And so support must be given to the hosting country and the hosting population to be able to host.
Right.
Definitely. Yes.
So schools and hospitals and all of that, I mean, some support would come in to sustain them. Great. Mr. Paddy, we're wrapping up the conversation. What do you want to leave us with?
I just want to remind everybody that it doesn't take much to be a refugee. We have refugees living amongst us. It's important that we highlight their presence. It's important that we highlight their contribution to our economy. It's important that we also highlight their needs, and as much as possible do what we can as individuals, as organizations, to help these persons, because they're people like you and me.
Ms. Kiriakou, as we wrap up, are refugees supposed to be in the host country perpetually? And I'm talking about integration, because we have heard about our brothers from Liberia, for example, Bujumbura. There are very many different stories that have come from that end, some of them into all manner of sorts. And the people now are beginning to wonder, was it a good thing having refugees situated right in the heart of where we live, or was it a bad thing? Let's talk about integration and whether or not they are supposed to stay perpetually in the host country.
Thank you, because that is a key question. Like Paddy said, nobody chooses to be a refugee. It's something that overtakes you. If there is a war, you flee. But is it perpetual? Unfortunately. If you look at the statistics in the world today, we are counting 110 million by May of this year, all over the world. Half of whom are internally displaced within their countries, but the other 35 million are across international borders. And those numbers are still growing with the situation in Sudan, as you know, with that conflict going on there. Should it be perpetual? Certainly not. In fact, the framers of refugee law had in mind the fact that that is a protective status for just a period of time, while solutions are being found to what is causing them to flee. So it shouldn't be perpetual. But as you and I know, if you take situations like Somalia, like Eastern DRC, they've been going on for decades. And sometimes you get solutions and then they recur. But one thing I want to point out is that the only way forward is to include people because of the length at which they are forced to stay. Take the situation of the Ivorians. They fled post-election violence.
That's right.
10 years ago. They stayed for a decade in exile. But eventually, when they were able to go back home, they didn't need any force or to be told. They went back. And the importance is to make peace durable. You must include refugees so that they continue, like everyone else, to actualize themselves, go to school, learn a skill, contribute to the local economy, because when they go back, then they are able to make peace durable by contributing to the development of their country.
Do all refugees eventually go back? I mean, or do you have some staying back and saying the trauma and all of that would be imprinted on my mind if I go back? I'd rather stay here because I found home away from home, or hope away from home.
Majority go back home. And it depends on how long a situation has persisted. But there are three solutions.
Tell me about
the one that benefits majority is voluntary repatriation, and majority go home.
Okay.
East or west, they say home is best. It doesn't matter how long. That's your route, you know.
That's right.
But there are those who stay away for so long. Some are even born in the country of exile, and that's home to them. You know, I know, for example, here there's some Togolese who are even more Ghanaian than Ghanaians themselves. They know all the local languages. And going back home is almost like uprooting them once again, you know. But they do not continue being refugees. There is the option as ECOWAS citizens to get immigration status, you know. But there are those who can neither return home because of the persecution they suffered, and who cannot continue staying in the country where they are because of the situation of their personal physical security, and they end up in a third country. We call it resettlement to a third country. But that's like 1% of the refugees globally. But majority go home, a handful stay on with immigration status, but just 1% end up in third countries.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kiragu and Mr. Paddy. We're grateful that you could join us, and I wish you all the best. 10 a.m. you say, that's the program, and it's at Ocean Oasis, right? Okay. Are we invited?
Yes, you're invited.
Okay.
So the Oasis Center is near the Kwame Nkrumah Circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kwame Nkrumah Circle. All right. Thank you so much indeed. We're grateful.
Thank you.
We are a part of God's great big family.
3FM Sunrise.